God, these quarantine days just seem to go on forever. I might as well just blast the AC and take another nap. Whoa, where am I? Is that who I think that is? Yep, that's definitely bassist Steve Swallow. He seems to be making a cup of coffee, I guess? Okay, pour over. Respect. Honestly, that's starting to smell really good, actually. Oh, Steve, is that for me? I am tired. I'll give it a taste.
Babe. Oh my gosh. What's going on?
I just had the craziest dream. I think I dreamt that Steve Swallow was making me a cup of coffee, and it was the most awful, disgusting, cup of coffee.
Babe, that wasn't a dream.
This is Score Study with me, Brian Kroc. After making my most recent Score Study video about pianist and composer Carla Bley, a new album was released on ECM Records by legendary guitarist John Scofield called Swallowtails. This album features Sco alongside legendary drummer Bill Stewart and electric bassist Steve Swallow, playing a set comprised entirely of Swallow's compositions. You'll remember from my last video that Steve is the husband of Carla Bley, and that I really enjoyed communicating with him via email. So I brought Swallowtails and my alto flute and saxophone along with me on a much needed vacation from the vagaries of New York City. I just loved the vibe of this record so much and was struck by a renewed awe for Swallow's compositions. I decided to try to commit each of the songs on that album to memory. I loved relearning Falling Grace and Eider Down. I learned some tunes for the first time, like Hello Bolinas and She Was Young, and I was really excited to hear one composition that was completely unknown to me called Awful Coffee. Carla Bley fans will remember her tune Awful Coffee from her big band's 2008 album Appearing Nightly. However, Steve's tune was actually recorded first for his 1997 quintet session Deconstructed. For whatever reason, the tune was never released. In fact, Steve himself thought that he had released Awful Coffee, when in fact he hasn't. Deconstructed is a stone-cold classic jazz album from the 90s, featuring Chris Potter on tenor saxophone, Ryan Kaiser on trumpet, Mick Goodrick on the guitar, and Adam Nussbaum on drum set. For this session, recorded in December 1996 at Steve and Carla's Grog Kill studio, Steve wrote a whole new book of contrafacts. In case you didn't know, in the world of jazz, a contrafact is a composition that consists of a new melody overlaid on a familiar set of chords from a jazz standard. The term contrafact was first used by James S. Patrick in an article about Charlie Parker for the Journal of Jazz Studies in 1975. FYI, Patrick derived the term contrafact from the classical music term contrafactum, which is used to describe a piece of music that substitutes new lyrics for a basically unchanged melody, which is really common. You can find it in medieval polyphony and the Middle Ages, in motets, and in modern music as well. Deconstructed is the second album in a series of 3 recordings featuring a quintet with 2 horns and a rhythm section. Steve told me these tunes are derived from the original Jazz Messengers as well as Horace Silver's quintets. He said, "I felt that every post-bebop composer needed to confront that paradigm." The first of these, 1993's Real Book, references the famous book of jazz lead sheets that was created and circulated by students at Berklee College of Music in the 1970s, and which features a handful of Swallow's compositions, written in a now famous manuscript style. Swallow's 3 albums of contrafacts showcases compositional quirks, such as his penchant for major and minor second intervals. gift for writing angular, complex melodies that feel natural and inevitable. For the album Swallowtails, Scofield performed Awful Coffee with an arrangement that he and pianist Larry Goldings arrived at together. He slowed down the tempo considerably, changed the harmony a little bit here and there, and decided to disregard the meticulously notated rhythms and durations, instead choosing to play every pitch as an upbeat. This syncopation makes the tune feel really groovy, and I loved the way Sco played it enough to learn the tune myself. When I looked more deeply into Steve's notated score, I was blown away by the many patterns that emerge, which are sort of lost on Scofield's recording. Steve said, "I've checked and I'm chagrined to find I haven't recorded Awful Coffee. I thought I had. It must have, as you infer, been meant for Deconstructed and failed to make the cut, so we'll be righting it wrong to do a video performance of it." So, before I go into detail about the many layers of patterns present in this piece, it's pretty cool that you get to hear the debut recording of Awful Coffee featuring the man himself playing his famous picked electric bass. FYI, for the price of simply buying me a cup of coffee, maybe take a moment to check out what's available on my Patreon page. You can get tons and tons of content, all my videos early, behind the scenes videos, exercises for you to practice, composition exercises for you to try out. Also like and subscribe. At first listen, Awful Coffee sounds like a clever contrafact on the 1944 song I Fall in Love Too Easily, with music by Jewel Stein and lyrics by Sammy Kahn. But I submit that it is much more than just that. I Fall in Love Too Easily wasn't included in the first or the second real book. And consulting the lead sheet in the third edition, I wasn't surprised to find a few mistakes. Check out the original version, performed by Frank Sinatra for the movie Anchors Aweigh, which was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song.
I fall in love too easily. I fall in love too fast.
The first thing that's clear is that Steve was inspired when writing Awful Coffee by the descending, stepwise melodic contour of I Fall in Love Too Easily. Melodic contour is the approximate shape created by the movement of pitches over time, and is well worth studying in order to understand what makes a melodic phrase work. If we simplify the melody of I Fall in Love Too Easily, removing local blips and bumps and smoothing out using only the most essential notes, we find a line that begins on middle C and proceeds down an E-flat major scale without any skips. Looking at Awful Coffee, we can observe exactly the same melodic contour, only in this case, Steve extended the downward line to complete an octave. He then crunchily harmonized these pitches, adding the step below each scale tone, as was his wont during this creative period. Swallow then fleshed out these guide tones, creating exceedingly interesting patterns within patterns. First, he added a contrapuntal lower line, which interacts with the I Fall in Love guide tones beautifully. These lower tones don't repeat until they complete a downward scale, just like the I Fall in Love guide tones. Additionally, each four-note group creates a similar cluster, consisting of a leap upwards, a leap downwards below the first note, and then another leap upwards above the first note, but below the second note. These creative melodic choices, in and of themselves, combine to form such a captivating statement that the rhythms might appear to be secondary. That point is proven by Schofield's amazing recording, which completely disregards the written rhythms, and which I love so much. However, I was intrigued by Steve's specificity in the written notations, enough so that I decided to count the eighth notes and quarter notes. Much to my surprise, two really cool patterns emerged. Let's count the durations between each pitch of the melody using eighth notes as our units of measurement. We find an eighth note, then an eighth note followed by an eighth rest. For our purposes, we're going to call this 2 eighth notes. Then again 2 eighth notes, then 3 eighth notes, and so on. Continuing for the entire piece, each phrase is built up of seemingly random iterations of the number set 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2. 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2. Sometimes this is interrupted by long notes consisting of either 6, 7, or 8 eighth notes, but which are essentially just heard as long notes. However, there is a macro pattern going on as well. The first phrase starts at the beginning of the series, on the number 1. The second phrase starts on the third number in the series. The third phrase starts on the 5th. Then the fourth phrase starts back on the beginning of the series. The 5th phrase again starts on the third number, and the 6th again starts on the 5th number. Interesting. My mind was blown to find that the bridge follows the same pattern. The first phrase of the bridge begins on 1, the second begins on the third number, and the third phrase begins on the 5th number. Having discovered these interesting patterns, I was sure that the strange exactitude of the rhythmic durations would indicate another pattern. As a music copyist, I know that too many rests between eighth notes can render a rhythm difficult to read. It's quite possible that Schofield ignored these rhythms for that very reason. It's often easier to read if the composer writes every note as a quarter note and then utilizes a staccato marking for the ones you'd like to have played short. In this case, Steve wrote everything exactly. He wrote eighth notes followed by eighth rests, which makes it hard to see exactly where the beat lands. Since Swallow went to the trouble to notate them this way, let's count up the shorts and longs. We're going to call any eighth note a short, and anything bigger than an eighth note a long. We find short, 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 long, short, long. Short, 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 long, short, long. What? Again, we find seemingly random iterations of another set that consists of 6 values. This begs us to see if that macro pattern presents itself again. The first phrase starts on the first value of the series. The second phrase starts on the third. The third phrase starts on the 5th. The fourth phrase again starts on the first. The 5th phrase again starts on the third. And the 6th phrase starts on the 5th. This is exactly the same as the pattern of eighth notes. At this point, my mind is already blown. But just for grins, we can assume, but let's check to see if the bridge follows the same pattern. The first phrase starts on the first value of that series. The second starts on 3, but the third phrase veers away. Okay, so it's close, but it's not exact. To me, this is the beauty of using patterns with discretion. Following a pattern fascistically if you will,
You Trump.
is a task better suited for a computer than a human being. The beauty of using patterns as a composer is that you can always let your taste take precedence and veer away from the pattern if you think another solution sounds better. Either way, you surely wouldn't have arrived at your individual, unique conclusion without input from the number series. You might be wondering, why even look at these patterns? This seems more number crunchy, less creative. Well, I would have to say that, yes, Awful Coffee would be a wonderful piece of music whether or not the patterns within it existed. John Scofield proved the truth of that statement with his recording. However, I sincerely doubt that anyone would have ever come up with such a unique melody unless they utilized patterns in their composing. As a composer myself, I love limiting my choices by forcing myself to use concocted patterns, and I would recommend that you try it as well. I've uploaded a bunch of composition exercises, pattern ideas, and just interesting sequences that are yours to use if you sign up for my Patreon. As always, thank you for listening. If you liked what you just saw, please click the subscribe button. I've got more coming in the future, and I'd love to have you with me. So thank you again. Steve Swallow wrote literally hundreds of phenomenal songs. Tell me your favorite in the comments section.